There's so much I could have talked about today. Actually, I realized where Jeff was going. I might have done the right thing and gone in the same direction and promoted my book, The Pandemic Information Gap, just out this week from MIT Press. So, you know, it mentions platform. Okay.
Apparently you just promoted it.
Always be selling, always be selling. Okay, so what I want to talk about actually is a bit more related to what Hal was talking about, but not innovation in general, but innovation in platforms. Because I think where we've come in our economic understanding of platforms is a lot of understanding of sort of how they work and, you know, why they exist and things like that. But this year we got a Nobel Prize in economics for an actual invention in terms of market designs. We don't have many economic prizes that are given for inventions. We're kind of more unusual that way, but this time we've got it. And what I wanted to suggest was a way of reframing how we look at platforms to assist us in actually coming up with new means of developing platforms, and also potentially of steering them in the social interest as well. So the question I want to ask is, is how the principles of market design can inform us about platform evolution. How those principles, and it's a literature that is been somewhat distinct from the platform literature, although there has been a crossover with regard to one particular domain, that is advertising markets. But I actually think the relationship is much closer. So what we talk, the main issue is sort of trying to understand when platforms are successful. And, of course, we've had a lot of work in this, mainly emanating from Jean Tirole and numerous co-authors. And one issue is identifying the importance of pricing. Pricing in platforms does not always impact on real behavior, but one of the definitions, in fact, of a two-sided platform is that pricing can actually be used to change actual behavior. So you want to use pricing in an optimal manner to make platforms successful. The other is, of course, the whole notion of networks. Again, something that dovetails quite nicely with platforms. You want to design your platforms to enhance the interdependencies amongst groups, so that they're, whatever value they're creating from joining together on a platform is actually enhanced. Networks are sometimes a constraint to establishing platforms, but once you've got one going, you do want to enhance those interdependencies. And then finally, we've got a goal of platform economics, which is coordination, is that we want to use rules regarding openness, that is, which elements are open and which are closed, to coordinate behavior on the platform. And both opening and closing can do that in different contexts, although it's not always clear which one will do what, and we have plenty of arguments and discussions regarding that. So that's where the platform economics literature has gone on, pricing, networks, and coordination, broadly speaking. But there's this related, or this literature that I'm going to argue is very related. I started off with, Al Roth. I know Al's on the call here. Thinking about when markets work, or actually, in much of his lectures is sort of more negative. When do they fail? But actually, I kind of like the positive framing. So when do they work? And he outlined some conditions born of his experience in this matter, which are very robust and deep in many respects. And you can read about it in his book, where he goes into it in lots of accessible detail. The first condition of when a market's going to be successful is that it manages to be thick, where you've got plenty of buyers and sellers coming together to transact, compete, form prices, etc. The second one is you want to avoid congestion. When you create a market, you're creating a public good. Every time we create a public good, we've got all sorts of people who try to work out innovative ways to free ride off that. Al talked a lot about unraveling, but there are other ways which timing is manipulated, and that causes some issues for markets. And the final thing you want for markets to work properly is you want them to be safe. When people come and they transact, you want to ensure that those transactions are honored, completed, etc. If you've got risks associated with that, it's going to undermine everything. So those are the three broad conditions. So I've done 3 conditions on platforms, 3 conditions on markets. What am I going to do? I'm going to relate them to each other. So in terms of thickness and networks, they're very closely related. I don't think that's news to anyone. The issue, and so I'm not going to talk too much about that. The issue is sort of thinking about pricing and coordination versus congestion and safety. And interestingly enough, those ones don't have any neat one-to-one mapping. In fact, there's a bit of a soup there, and that's good because that's an opportunity for us for innovation. So let me discuss congestion and safety in turn and what that implies. So if we're taking congestion route, remember oops. I don't know what happened there. If we're taking congestion route, so having an established platform, like having an established market, having an established platform is akin to have created a public good. What that means, of course, is as soon as you do that, there are incentives for people to free ride and to find innovative ways, we'll call them innovative, ways of free riding around that. Because if you free ride, you can get lots of private benefits and you don't care about the diminishing of the public benefits. So how does a market designer respond to that? They respond to that by creating very hard and fast rules coupled with enforcement to prevent things like unraveling going on. And we saw those same sort of rules emerge in the in auctions regarding activity rules to make sure that people did not engage in free riding behavior. So platforms have something similar that they do. They engage in rules and enforcement to prevent bad behavior. Rules and enforcement to prevent bad behavior, because when a platform is established, one of the first things that occurs is people start exploiting it in ways that you do not want, that are neither in the interests of the platform or in the broader public interest. Now, what this leads to are rules that tend to be one size fits all. And so they impact negatively on some participants. We've all known this with spam filters and all sorts of other things. There are trade-offs with these things. But we sort of tend to have one-size-fits-all rules emerge in both markets and platforms, and they have the same trade-offs associated with them. Now that gives you rise to all manner of, you can see now where you might be looking at some of the issues that have arisen with respect to platforms, and I've just listed a few of them here. And often they are objecting to rules. And so people say, oh, this rule came in and it hurt me. And of course, my contention is that's to be expected. That's to be expected. You have rules. They are going to have some aspect of non-nuance to them. And so we have all that occurring right here. And I think you can see each of these conflicts as an issue that are arising of, we have to use rules and rules are imperfect. So what do you do? Well, we're going to improve matters. How do we think about improving matters? One possible solution is that we employ more AI. And what AI has a tendency to do is find us more edge cases and allow our rules to evolve, be more predictive and flexible in an automated fashion. So, we have plenty of, our spam filters are now virtual AI solutions to that, to somehow balance everything out, where every bit of mail is treated individually as predictive of spam or not. But in other cases, we have not been able to use AI, and we've relied on more people. I think most people employed by Facebook or its ecosystem are in the business of trying to enforce rules going on, the content moderation. Those solutions occur. Now, AI is sort of nice and friendly. More people is cost. We look very old economy there, so that's not such a great outcome, but they're both ways of doing that. The one that I want to enter into this framework that I think has been insufficiently relied upon is voice. This was the solution that Albert Hirschman noted with regard to our other big rule-making institution, government, and that you would use voice in order to moderate find the right exceptions, and become more flexible in your application of rules. And I could imagine that being used in the platform context quite a lot. In fact, eBay were a very early user of this sort of thing. Okay, so that's congestion. So we could think of ways of being able to deal with that. What about safety? This is the other big issue that comes up with respect to platforms. So desirable platform activities require others to take actions and make investments in a platform. No platform just exists and everybody acting passively. A platform is there because it's coordinating behavior on it. That means people have to be properly incentivized. So in market power, how do we get people to participate? We make commitments to promises and expectations being met. We make these things safe. We say you're going to come and things are going to work out as expected. When they don't happen that way, people shy away from markets, the markets fail. Platforms, the principal means we've thought about safety is being committed to various forms of openness so that we allow people to have access to competitive options. Okay, that allows that moderation to occur. The problem with this is that both of these are commitments, and the commitments can be easily eroded, even if they're sort of stated up front, by a lack of transparency and also a lack of exit options, which is the other thing we face with platforms. They tend towards monopoly elements. And so we have all that going on here as another set of things that arise regarding people, lack of transparency, wanting understanding of commitments, wanting more competitive options, etc. But again, this is an opportunity for innovation to find new ways of doing these things. One such thing is data portability. It's related to an old idea that I can claim some responsibility for, which is number portability, which was a reallocation of property rights and allowing for negotiated transfers and other things to facilitate a reduction in switching costs. Another issue that I've pushed lately is identity portability, which is a form of interoperability that we do actually enjoy in most telecommunications networks, but we haven't applied them to, for instance, social networks. It is another way by which we give people more competitive options by reducing switching costs, and switching costs in particular due to network effects. There have been calls for algorithmic transparency. This has come up again. Stephen Wolfram has an idea about how to facilitate a market for algorithms that would rely on transparency and allow people to see what's going on. We have lots of requirements coming up, again, as commitments to transparency primarily, which is for symmetric treatment going on. The biggest of these is net neutrality. That gets talked about and economists argue about, but in reality, what it is a commitment to certain openness and certain equal treatment going on, which can be diminished in platforms. There's been a long-standing argument, for instance, about whether Google's own products and other things get priority in Google's own search. That's an issue of asymmetric treatment, and there may be merit for that in certain circumstances, but the other problem is that it erodes that commitment. Finally, there is discussion in many circles of permissionless access. We want to have situations where you're able to innovate and not have to ask permission from multiple people. Now, for the vast majority of time, people were talking about permission from government and under Soto and other things like that, and establishing new firms, etc. But, and anybody dealing with COVID and the FDA as an example of that, but we now also have that with relation to platforms. How many hoops do you have to go into in order to be able to link with a platform? Sorry? Is there a question? Oh. And I had a recent book that went into this in quite a bit of detail as well. So my end conclusion is that I think actually thinking about our market design challenges, and in particular congestion and safety, and applying those same logics to platforms will lead us to consider more options, both for the platforms themselves and for regulators, at getting to the heart of some of these issues. Because I fear that some of the other solutions, divestiture, separation of elements and other things like that, are not the sort of things that are suitable for platforms. You wouldn't do those in markets, therefore why should you do them in platforms? And so this is a perspective that I'm offering here. and a discussion that we might be able to have. Thanks, Steve.